Good evening. Welcome. You should all be very proud of yourselves. You've hung in there through, what, 3 or 4 sessions? Um, so congratulations on that. And welcome to this session about going out of state for college and how the Western Undergraduate Exchange can help with that. Uh, My name is Palmer Muntz, and I'm a regional admissions counselor with the University of Alaska Fairbanks. If the term regional admissions counselor doesn't mean anything to you, what that means is I'm not in Fairbanks, Alaska. I'm actually based here in Washington. I'm in Vancouver, Washington. Makes it a little bit easier to get around to visit high schools and so on. In fact, I've probably been to each of your high schools. Um, maybe this year, certainly within the last couple of years. And I then am your admissions counselor because I serve all the students in the state of Washington. On this screen, there's a QR code and a URL. The folks that are putting together the program tonight would love to have you go and complete a survey, give your feedback about the evening. So please do that. And with that, we'll kind of get rolling. Actually, before we get rolling, let me do a little commercial for my employer, okay? I hope that, let me just entice you with the idea of going on an adventure for college, doing something kind of crazy and going all the way up to Fairbanks, Alaska. I can pretty much promise you that if you're a student at UAF, you will get to see and do and experience things that you won't get to do anywhere else. You could even get to join, as you can see pictured here, the 40 Below Club. Each year, the first time it gets to 40 below zero, and it doesn't happen all that often. You grab your friends and you go take your picture with the temperature sign on campus in your swimsuit. Last week, it got to -50. So there were cars lined up by the temperature sign with people waiting to run out and get their picture taken and join the 40 Below Club. So UAF is the flagship university for the state of Alaska. We're a national research university. A lot of students from your area will come up to UAF for engineering, for the natural sciences, especially things like wildlife biology and geosciences, marine biology, and then fire science. We have one of the best firefighting programs in the country. So a lot of the students in your area who are interested in firefighting in the fire science program will come to UAF. That's enough of my commercial. Let's move on, okay? One of the great things about being an American is we have a ton of choices. When it comes to higher education, there's probably about 4,000 different options. And you compare that with, there are some countries around the globe where the government will tell you where to go to college, and that's your only choice. So it's wonderful to have choices, but it can also be kind of overwhelming. And so how do you filter through that? I want to encourage you, and you're probably here because you're already open to this idea, but encourage you to consider the idea of leaving Washington for college. Why would you do that? There's several good reasons. One is you may find that the area you're interested in studying is what would be called an impacted area of study, meaning it's very hard to get into. An obvious example here in the West, I think, is a lot of nursing programs are very competitive to get into. But from my background, at one time I was working for a university in the Midwest, and in my particular part of the state we were in, there were actually nursing programs that were seeking students and recruiting students. It was not competitive. They were still good programs. And so that might be a reason to go to another part of the country. Also, there might be programs that aren't available in Washington, or maybe are specialized in certain parts of the country. A couple of examples for my school are, like, if you want to study Alaska Native Studies, you're probably going to want to come to University of Alaska Fairbanks. Or maybe you want geological engineering. Alaska has every different kind of geological experience possible. And so you might want to take a look for that reason. In certain fields, so some students might say, I really want to work in this industry, or I'd really love to have a career with that company. And so you may want to look for a college that's located near that industry base or near those company headquarters, because you might find there are more opportunities for the internships that really interest you. And then at maybe a more fun level, I think one of the reasons is just to experience a different culture. This country is so vast. So go to New Orleans, go to New York City or Washington, D.C., or whatever it is that might appeal to you, to see, to sample what it's like in a different part of the United States. Going away a distance also certainly brings a little bit different type of maturity and independence. You're not going to be able to take your laundry home and have mommy do it for you. And then affordability is another factor. And we're going to unpack that some more, obviously, as we move through this PowerPoint. Okay. 4,000 different colleges. How do you narrow it down? I'm going to give you just some very basic tools. You probably already are somewhat familiar with this or just intuitively are doing this. But begin to form an imagination of what you'd like to find in a college. That can be hard to do until you've done a little bit of, looking at colleges to figure out what's out there. But what do you want to be when you grow up? What career field, what academic field interests you? A little note of caution here is I know that a lot of times students change their mind several times, maybe even after they've started college. So I'm not sure that this necessarily should be the be all and end all for a lot of students, but nonetheless, it's a factor to consider. Then there's location. What kind of environment do you want to be in? Do you want an urban area, suburban, rural? Do you want a warm climate? I've been shocked how many students are like, oh, I like cold weather. Okay, great. We're the school for you. I tell students, this is the first time in your life probably that you get a say in where you're going to live. What size school appeals to you and fits you? I mean, in the United States, we've got universities with 50 and 60,000 students, and you might love that. The variety and the life of that, the football games might really appeal to you. And yet 40% of the colleges in the country have less than 1,000 students. And so I went to a very small college. One of my best friends went to a really big state university. If we had traded places, we probably both would have been miserable. Also take into consideration, how big are the classes at the school? Some students super comfortable with large lecture halls. They actually maybe prefer being a little more anonymous, while others want to make sure they're in a place where they can ask questions and it's a little more intimate. Student life, clubs. Do you like to go skiing? Sororities, fraternities? What kind of environment is there on campus? That's something that certainly can be a factor in your college decision if that's important to you. And then, of course, money has to play a role. But having played with this, then you also want to consider what's negotiable and what's non-negotiable, right? So you might have a preference for going to school in the South because you like warm, humid weather, but your academic program you cannot find there. So you might say, my academic program is a non-negotiable, but I'm willing to go someplace cold to get it. So that's something you want to weigh out too. From there, once you have some idea of the type of school you're looking for, you can go window shopping. And as you're window shopping, that's what I like to call it, your ideas may continue to form and you'll discover new things. So, of course, we've got this thing called Google. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's a lot of resources online. I'm going to give you some of those resources with our next slide as well. If you're a high school junior, you probably have just discovered how very popular you are as suddenly you're getting emails from maybe all over the country and mail in your mailbox. I would just like to encourage you, actually look at it, okay? Even, you get an envelope in the mail and you look at the address and think, there's no way on earth I would ever go to the school. Go ahead and open it. Flip through the brochure. What you may find is that you discover something in there that, oh, what's this honors college thing? Hey, that sounds kind of interesting. I still don't want to go to this university, but I think I might like to find an honors college, maybe at some other place. And now that's something you can add to your list of maybe negotiables and non-negotiables. And also, as you open up and look at the emails, scan through them and look for little tidbits that might jump out at you. You might be surprised that suddenly the school catches your eye when you never would have expected that. Maybe not. And if not, remember at the bottom of most of those emails, there's an unsubscribe button, and you can click that. And I know that hurts us just a little bit in the college admissions offices, but we'll be okay. College fairs are another great tool. I'll talk about that some more in a second, but a great way to window shop through different college options. And then definitely remember that almost every college welcomes you to come for a visit. You can sign up for an appointment to maybe get a campus tour, possibly eat on campus, maybe meet with a professor in the department that interests you and so on. Or they'll have campus preview days, events where, groups of students will come. Go and take a test drive. As you're on campus, you'll get a sense of, does this fit me? And you see lots of little subtle things like what are the signs that are on the light poles? What's going on Friday night here? And do the students seem happy? Do the professors seem approachable? Whatever is important to you. Let's bounce back to the tools where you can look at colleges on the internet. There's a lot of garbage out there on the internet. So I talked with some of my colleagues who are high school counselors and asked, what are some sites that they recommend? The first one on this list is one that I threw in there. College Navigator is a site run by the federal government, and it gives a lot of data about schools. And so it's helpful for kind of comparing schools side by side without a lot of nuance. It's just very black and white. But then sites like Big Future and Peterson's basically have search engines where you can plug in some of the things you're interested in, and they will prioritize for you colleges that might be a good fit to investigate. Okay. I also have to point out this picture here. This is my daughter. She started her college search really young. She's now a freshman in college. But needless to say, this is my favorite picture in my slideshow, okay? I mentioned college fairs before. If you've never been to one, they're great, okay? I've used the term window shopping several times. They're classic window shopping. You'll walk into the facility. Some college fairs are, for instance, held in gymnasiums, and you'll see rows of tables with people like me standing behind them. And we've got our propaganda laid out on the table with, our literature, and you can just go from table to table, asking some of your key questions and getting a little bit of information. Hey, do you have fraternities and sororities? No, that's really important to us. And you move off to the next table, and there they do. And so then your next question is, do you have civil engineering? Oh, you do? Great. And you might decide to request more information, but it's just a chance to dip your toe in the water and get to know a variety of schools in a really easy way. There are two college fairs coming up in April. One is going to be held at WSU Everett and another one at Seattle University. I'm guessing that your high school counseling offices will be publicizing this and sharing information and details with you as the time gets a little bit closer. And there'll probably be anywhere from, 80 to 120 different colleges and universities at each of those college fairs. Then each fall, next year it'll be in late October probably, there is another fair that's held at the Convention Center in Seattle. This is the same type of thing, but on steroids. And there will be probably 200 to even 300 different colleges and universities there. With all three of these fairs, you're going to find not only schools that are here in the Pacific Northwest, but all over the country and even internationally. And especially in the fall, you'll see a very wide variety. And again, the college fairs are free. Just come, spend a couple hours walking through and getting a sense of what's out there. So now you've begun to narrow your choices. You have some ideas of which colleges are interesting to you, but you have to figure out how to pay for it, right? The foundational piece at almost every college is going to be the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. This is a cliche, but let me encourage you, fill out a FAFSA, even if you don't think you're going to qualify, and do it every year, okay? I'll give you a quick little anecdote. Told you I have a daughter who's a freshman in college. Last year, we did a FAFSA for her, and all she was eligible for was student loans. That's fine. There may be times when you need to be able to access a student loan, okay? We've done the FAFSA now for next year, and this time she's actually eligible for a small federal Pell Grant, so some free money, which is even better, okay? So things can shift from year to year. Usually it's pretty consistent, but it's worth taking a shot at, even if you're fairly confident you're not going to be eligible for anything except for student loans. Also remember that often the universities themselves are the most generous sources of financial aid. So a lot of times the grants and scholarships that are going to make the biggest difference will actually come from the universities themselves. Of course, you'll want to look at scholarships you can apply for, maybe in the local area there, not ROTC, the Rotary Club or Elks Club, maybe giving some small scholarships each year. Apply for those, or there are national scholarships you can pursue as well. And then this last bullet here, I'll have to confess to being a little bit of a hypocrite on this. I say, don't let the price tag prevent you from considering a college. And that's true. I believe that. But every time my high school junior walks in and shows me a college that costs $60,000, my stomach kind of hurts. But remember, you won't know the net cost, the true cost, whatever phrase you want to use, until after, as a student, you've applied for admission, you've done your FAFSA, you've applied for scholarships to whatever extent is needed, you've been accepted for admission, and then you have your financial aid offer. And at that point, you can begin to know whether it's affordable. One little quick piece of advice is I think it's always good for students to have at least one option that they know they can be content with, that'll do a good job for them, and that they know they can afford even if things fall apart. Because sometimes there are curves in the road in life, and it's really good to make sure that you have an option that if things blow up, you still can go to college and continue to progress towards your goals. Okay, next. You probably remember the game show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? So I have a quiz for you. You usually must pay out-of-state tuition when you, A, attend any college outside your home state, B, attend any public college outside your home state, or C, attend a college in the District of Columbia or Puerto Rico, because they are not states, right? Okay. I'm not going to wait for you to answer. You probably know anyway. So let me just tell you, it's B. So sometimes, a lot of times high school students assume it's going to be A, every college outside your home state, but private colleges typically charge the same tuition, no matter where you live, no matter what your residency is. Same for everyone. Public universities, on the other hand, usually charge a higher tuition to students who aren't from their state, non-resident tuition or out-of-state tuition. Here in Washington, for instance, you'll pay a lower in-state tuition than if you go out of state, because your tax dollars have helped to subsidize and support that college. But when you head to Illinois, you haven't been paying tax dollars there, and so you're not eligible. So typically you pay out-of-state tuition at a public school outside of Washington. So leads to this question, fact or fiction? It always costs more to attend college out of state. You know the answer to that, right? Now I'm leading you the wrong way. Fiction, of course. There are exceptions to that, and we're going to talk about that. Some universities will have special scholarships just for non-resident students. In recent years, University of Alabama is a prime example of that. I don't know what they're doing right now, but in the recent past, they've been very generous with scholarships to attract students from other states to Alabama. You'll find academic scholarships, need-based grants, and need-based scholarships. Also, consider the cost of living. You know that here, in the Seattle area, not the cheapest place. There are other parts of the country, maybe more rural parts of the country, where costs are lower, and you may see that reflected then in lower tuition, lower room and board costs, and so on. And then there's the Western Undergraduate Exchange, or WUI. We all call it WUI because Western Undergraduate Exchange is way too many syllables, and so we just are lazy and we call it WUI. What is WUI? WUI is a program that's administered by the Western Interstate Commission of Higher Education, which we call WICHE, of course, because that's way too many syllables. You don't need to know that. Just letting you, that's just where it's housed. You don't need to know that. There's about 160 colleges and universities that participate in WUI. What is WUI? It's basically a tuition reduction program, a discounted tuition. Some schools will call it a scholarship. It kind of functions like a scholarship. And for the most part, at most schools, what it is WUI means you'll pay tuition that's equal to 1.5 times what in-state tuition is. Okay. We're going to talk about this, but a real important little caveat is that WUI is not automatic. Okay. So we'll unpack that in a second. But what's it worth to you? Okay. Here's some examples. When I'm talking about WUI to students, like at a college fair, I'll usually tell them if they go to a school that offers WUI and gives it to them, it'll usually save them $10,000 to $15,000 a year compared with non-resident tuition. Kind of a big deal. These 6 schools that I threw on the slide here, you can see a range from about $10,500 a year with WUI up to over $17,000 a year at NAU and at Utah. Now, I'll say this, I don't think that the savings in some ways really matter all that much. The more important thing is, what's the bottom line? What's the tuition going to be? Because sometimes you'll see a lot of savings, and that might be because that school has an inflated non-resident tuition, or perhaps has a really low resident tuition. Okay. So what really matters is, if you receive WUI, what's the cost going to be? But it's kind of neat to see how much the savings is. And when you think in terms of being able to save $15,000, $16,000, $17,000, that's pretty cool. So I mentioned before that there's 160 colleges approximately that participate in WUI. Who are they? There are schools that are in these states on this slide, basically the entire Western United States, but not all of them. Not all the public universities participate. So it gets a little murky there. Just an obvious example is, I don't believe that any of the University of California campuses offer WUI at all. Okay. So you can look at this and say, hey, I would love to go to school in Colorado. Now you need to figure out which colleges or universities in Colorado do offer WUI. How can I do that easily? Here's how. I've got a tool for you. If you go, I told you didn't need to know what WICHE was. Well, for this one thing, you'll need to go back and think about WICHE. If you go to wiche.edu/WUI, wiche.edu/WUE, you'll see an overview of what the WUI program is, similar to what I just walked through. But to the left side of your screen, you'll see a link for the WUI Savings Finder. If you go ahead and click on that, it'll take you to a WUI search engine, basically. And you can plug in the types of degree programs, maybe the states that you're interested in, and it'll produce for you a list of the schools that participate in WUI. I want to point out at the bottom left of this screen, one aspect of the search engine is you can actually search by major. And that's really helpful, right? However, I want to point out that this is an imperfect tool. Just for a simple example, sometimes different universities will call the same major something slightly different. And so if you plug in the name of a program, but one of the universities calls it something a little different, it may not show up in the results. Okay. Doesn't matter. You can still play around with it. I just want you to know that's how it could work. And after you get your results here, It will tell you for each of the schools a little bit of information about that university and about their WUI policy. But what I would encourage you to do is to actually go to each individual university's website. You may want to start by just Googling on the name of the school and WUE. That'll often take you to a page that explains their WUI policies. We'll get into that in a second. But then also you can look at their majors. You'll get the most up-to-date, accurate information usually on the school's own website. Unfortunately, there's not one WUI application you can fill out and get approved at all the participants. No, we wouldn't want it to be that easy, would we? WUI is handled individually by each university, okay? So some schools will have early deadlines. For instance, I believe that at Boise State, you need to apply by sometime in December to be considered for WUI. Some will have GPA cutoffs. We'll look at that in just a second. One thing I want to mention is the very last bullet on this slide. If a student accepts WUI, one of the things that they're agreeing is that they're not going to seek to become a state resident while they're a college student. In other words, they're not going to take WUI and then try to also qualify for the lower in-state tuition. They're going to say, thank you very much, I'm content, okay? And so that sometimes is confusing to people and occasionally does make a difference in the choices that you make. Let me walk you through just some examples of how WUI policies can vary, because this can really, you'll see a lot of variety here. At the University of Montana, for instance, you have to have a 3.95 GPA in order to receive WUI. I believe that everyone who applies with that GPA or higher receives WUI. Their sister school, Montana State University, only requires a 3.0 GPA. Oh, that's great, right? But in addition, you have to do a separate WUI application. You have to submit an essay. You have to meet the deadline. And then it's a highly competitive selection process. I believe I saw on their website that only about 30% of people who apply for WUI are actually awarded it. University of Wyoming is another variation. There, you have to have a certain minimum GPA and also a minimum SAT or ACT score. And then if you qualify, you're awarded. I like to show, of course, highlight my school at the very bottom because we're the best, right? We are at the complete opposite extreme. We give WUI to every student from the state of Washington. And as a general rule, there's no separate application required. If there is one, it's very, very simple for those students. Some other variation. I told you that sometimes schools will have limitations on which majors are eligible. Often nursing programs are excluded. At Boise State, you could be at any major except radiologic science. The most extreme example, the last time I checked at University of Arizona, you could get WUI, but only if you're in one of two majors, mining engineering and natural resources. But their sister school, Northern Arizona University, allows all majors to receive WUI. Same thing's true at UAF. Even our two-year programs are associate degrees. With that just about done, I have one more thing to just encourage you to check out, and that is, as you talk with colleges about their WUI policy, ask if they allow students to stack scholarships on top of WUI. Some schools will say, hey, WUI is the best thing we offer. Say thank you. This is all you're getting. And you'll say thank you and walk away. Others, however, will allow you to add academic scholarships or other types of institutional scholarships on top of the WUI, so that can really sort of multiply the affordability. There's no right or wrong with any of these things. You just need to know what are the policies so you know what to expect. And with that, we'll wrap up. Again, hit the QR code or this URL to give feedback on the evening. And if you have questions, I know that we're basically out of time, but I'm glad to take a couple of minutes still. If you have a question to put in the chat, or if you want to unmute and ask something, we can do that for a couple of minutes. And if I've been so awesome that you don't need to know anything else, feel free to just log off and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thanks for coming. So if there are any questions, I'll just hang out for a second. So the question was asked here, is it best to look at each individual school for majors that qualify for WUI? Yes. Yeah, unfortunately, that's probably what you'll need to do. You can use the search engine as a starting place. But yeah, unfortunately, it becomes a little bit of legwork on your part. Thanks. Any other questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and shut this down. Have a great evening. I'm really glad you came to join. I hope it was worthwhile. And please feel free to reach out to me if anything else comes up. I'll be glad to help. Thank you.